JKB back with another episode. Today on the show, we'll be talking about my time with Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Thank you so much to Ubisoft for letting me get to play this game for 3 hours. I mean, I'm not going to get into detail on how this happened, but let's just say the technology now is ridiculous, and they went out of their way to make sure that we could play this and I can make this video for you. So huge thank you to the people at Ubisoft that made this happen. I'm going to give my general thoughts on my playtime and talk about a few different things that kind of stood out to me in the game. The game is set in 1873 AD and recounts an alternate history of the Viking invasion of Britain. The player controls Eivor, a Viking raider who becomes sort of embroiled in conflict between the Brotherhood of Assassins and the Templar Order. Now, of course, following in the footsteps of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, you'll be able to play as a female or male Viking in the game. The character has the same name, just depends if you want to go male or female. Voice acting is different for both, obviously. It's not some guy going, "Hi, I'm a female." So, I mean, it's really well done in terms of its acting. I get that out of the way. Not that I experienced a ton of it, but from what I played, it's on par with Assassin's Creed Odyssey in terms of its acting. It definitely is up there. It's not like it's bad, but it is the same as Assassin's Creed Odyssey, so it's on that level. Now, there's something I should point out. The gameplay footage that you're seeing below is 1080p at 60 frames per second, and it is not the next generation version, nor will you see any of that basically online. I mean, that's kind of my guess, unless it comes straight from Ubisoft. I believe I was playing the PC version running at max settings, so don't expect to see the game, you know, on a PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X. It's just not happening yet. I just wanted to point that out because, as we all know, some footage got out before everybody got to release their footage like I'm doing today, and I thought that was kind of unfair, and there was lots of videos made, and I wanted to be vocal about it and say that I think it's silly. People are complaining. It looks so bad and all this stuff. It's leaked footage of a game in progress. There's no real set release date yet, so calm down. Let's go over what I experienced and see if, you know, these people were right complaining about it, which they weren't. Now, as the game loaded into the world, there was one thing that I thought kind of instantly, and I thought, this is The Witcher 3. I mean, there's no doubt the team took huge inspiration from The Witcher 3, and I'm not complaining about this. I mean, you start the game on horseback, and it feels exactly, and I mean exactly, like The Witcher 3. Could I just say they took the last game and added a bunch of Witcher 3 into it? I mean, maybe. It's hard to say what, you know, what they want to do with the rest of the game because I didn't experience that. But it takes a lot of Witcher 3. Let's just say that right off the bat, and it's hard to deny that. So I'm just being honest with everyone out there, and it's they want it to be Witcher 3. There's no doubt about it, and there's no issue with that. I just think it's a lot of Witcher. Now, as for the story, I'm not going to talk about it too much because, yeah, I only played a little bit of that portion of the game. I could say that the writing is definitely on pace with the last game. It's now kind of the important question, is the content interesting enough to be the main focus of the whole game? Vikings are interesting, but I can't say I've ever wanted to, you know, dive deep into the mythology of Viking history. And from what I experienced, I can honestly say that I'm at least a little excited in exploring the Viking world in terms of the story and the mythology of Vikings. I can't say after playing this that I'm like, oh my god, I can't wait to learn all about it. It's got me interested. The second thing I noticed was the level of detail put into the world is very impressive. Now, it's also important to say that the footage that you see is a work in progress build of the game, so anything can change. So I'm basing on what I saw in this sort of demo that I got to play. I thought it looked gorgeous at times, and I think it's on par with the last game in the series. I think it's also important to say that I was only playing a small fraction of the game, and I have no idea how it'll turn out, but I can say from everything I experienced, it felt like it felt like a continuation from the last game than a new experience. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because a lot of people love Odyssey. I mean, some consider it to be the best game in the series. I don't know about that, but I I definitely had a blast playing it, and this definitely feels like a continuation of that, just with different mythology. It's easy to pick these games apart and say, yeah, they took the best systems from the past games and they put them together with gameplay systems from other games that really worked to form what you're currently playing or seeing on screen. I get the sense that they've done a lot of this before, but with a Viking theme over it. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just the feeling I got as I played. I'd be lying if I didn't say that they're trying new things. I mean, there's a whole sequence where you're using this new gameplay mechanic, but it seems, I don't know, it seems a little bit off. And I don't want to get into detail too much into some of the stuff because I'm not sure exactly what I can mention in this video. But the question is, in the final version of the game, will those sequences be sort of tightened up? I hope they are, and they're a big part of the game. And I mean, I could say it's part of the mission structure. You go into sort of this stronghold, and you gotta bust down these doors, and it just doesn't feel great yet. But again, this is a work in progress. Now, for some randomness, as I was exploring the world, I came across this old fisherman who was teaching his son the ways of a Viking. And as I kept talking to the fisherman, I started to realize that I've come across a side mission. You know, it was not blatantly a side mission on the map. It just said nothing. It just said a town. So I'm talking to some guy randomly, and all of a sudden, it started to feel like, wait, this is something different. Sort of like a boss fight. And that was really interesting because I soon learned after that experience that there's these mini boss fights all over the world. And you kind of just stumble across them. And when you do that, you're not ready for it. So it's interesting, unexpected, and really cool gameplay because they all fight in different, patterns and different weapons. So it's not all the same over and over. Keeps the world fresh. Now, a lot of what I played in terms of the missions felt very epic. I mean, there's no doubt about it. There's some epic missions in this demo. However, it's kind of confusing because it's so many people running around. You can't figure out who's on your team, who isn't on your team. I mean, there's a reason for that in the story, which I don't know if I can even talk about, but it is kind of confusing because you have to put your reticle, directly over a character to see if they're a bad guy or not. Because if it stays the normal color, then they're a good guy. If it goes red, then that's an NPC enemy character. So they're all running around the screen. It's very confusing at times during these giant battles. Just like in the last game, you get those giant battles. You're still going to knock the shit out of all these characters and have a great time. It's just going to be kind of confusing at times. But that brings me to the fighting gameplay mechanics. It's just as good as the last game. Uses the same mechanics. You have the abilities mapped out on the right trigger. You can use them as long as you have the power to do so. And I absolutely loved using some of these in this game, and I'm really glad they're back because I think Viking mythology is a bit more brutal than the past game. So having like a bunch of ridiculous weapons on you, and then you hit a button, and all of a sudden your character goes into a stance and throws these axes at people's heads in a row. It's like, wow, okay, that's powerful. That works great. I'm gonna combo that up with some of my main attacks and have a great time. It feels really good to battle out in this game, that's for sure. Feels just as good as the last game. So I don't think anyone should be worried about the combat. I think they finally got it to exactly where it needs to be. It feels different at times, different levels of it, without being overly complicated. There was one moment where I changed my weapons from hand to hand, which changes the whole stance of your character. And that's something I'm not going to get too deep into here, but it didn't explain that to me, so I was like, why can't I block all of a sudden? But I realized that the character has two different stances, and you just tap A twice really quick to switch weapons in your hands to change up the combat instantly. So, I mean, that opens up a whole new gameplay mechanic where, you can now do combos you're used to and then hit, change your stance in the mid-combo, and I mean, it just gets out of hand. And I mean, that's for the hardcore players. You'll have a great time figuring all that stuff out. Now, I should point out that there are boats in the game. However, I was kind of on a boat for like 5 minutes, but I spent most of my time just looking at the different atmospheres in the game, and it's absolutely gorgeous at times. It starts to rain, and it's like thundering, and you get that, well, I mean, it feels like The Witcher. It feels like The Witcher. I can't deny it. There's this really cool feature tied to the D-pad that lets you take control of this bird and you fly over this huge area. I mean, it's limited. You can't just like fly into the distance and figure everything out, but it kind of gives you a sense of the world and how far it'll take you to reach your destination. And I mean, it looks gorgeous to me. I think it looks really, really, really well designed. Now, another weapon you'll be using all the time is your bow and arrow, which has its own abilities mapped out using the X, Y, A, B buttons. And when you get into combat, it's fun because you'll be able to pull the bow out randomly and use the abilities to take down a bunch of enemies at once and switch back to your Viking axe. And it's just crazy combat. It's a lot of fun when you get the hang of it. There's a bit of a learning curve. Once you get over that, I mean, it's just a blast to play. The combat is just really fun. Now, the strangest thing I saw was this stone stacking minigame, and you basically stack stones. You can rotate the stones and stack them. I mean, what the hell's the point of this, I thought? Well, it's tied into gaining experience points in the game, and I'm assuming that you can stack stones all over the map, and of course, everything you would expect from the last game is here. Skill points, leveling system, all of that stuff is here, but I really didn't get into it. So the stacking game is interesting because it's kind of also used to calm down everything. It's like a pacing thing, kind of like a meditation thing within the world. And I mean, it's cute, it's fun. It was okay. Now, I did, however, find out that there was fishing, and fishing in the game uses a tension line, just like every other fishing game. I'm not super good at it because I don't have the patience, but it's interesting that you can fish in the game and go down to streams and little rivers and just spend a little time doing that. So it's cool to see that in here. It kind of expands the world a little. My overall experience with the game was enjoyable. I think if you're into Viking mythology, you're going to be super happy with the story. There seems to be everything that you played ever in any Assassin's Creed game that ever worked seems to be here. Of course, you can climb all the structures in the game, but honestly, I found myself forgetting that I was playing Assassin's Creed at times. I mean, you go into the villages and you will be doing a lot of climbing, but I know I keep saying this, it just feels like The Witcher 3. It does. It really, really does. There's a ton of different weapons and things to do in the world. I don't think I could have really covered everything in the 3 hours I experienced in this video. So if you have any questions about certain things, you can ask me in the comments below. I think for what I played, the game has a lot of promise. You can clearly see many of the different design teams are working at their top tier here. Design-wise, it's spectacular. Combat feels tight. I mean, everything feels great. I think they need to get it together a little, like kind of bring it all together. I mean, again, I only played 3 hours, so it's safe to say that if you're a fan of the last game, you'll probably love this game. And I'm really looking forward to it, that's for sure. So I'll be doing a full review on the channel. My overall feeling now is like, okay, I see that everything can come together in spectacular ways based on the last game in the series. So let's see you bring it together here, kind of flesh everything out, and give us the best Assassin's Creed yet. Is that going to happen? Well, that remains to be seen. Do I think there's a chance that could happen here? Based on just walking around the world with the detail, there might be a chance. There might be. But again, I'm not going to go crazy here and say this is the best Assassin's Creed I've ever played, because I only played 3 hours of it, and if I talk like that, I think you guys should unsubscribe. So let's wait until the full game's out. Had a blast playing it, definitely in combat. I mean, some of that, like I said, some of those major epic battles could be fixed. That definitely needs some work. And there's other things that do need work in the game. But let's just see. This is a work in progress. Let's wait it out. So I'll see you in the next episode of JKB, which will be a review. See you soon.